All right, our third speaker is famous amongst the Ski Institute alumnus. It's Dave Weinstein. So I've also known Dave for more than 30 years, which is very surprising because we haven't changed at all. Um, Especially Dave. He still looks the same. Um, so Dave is basically, you could say there would be no ski without Dave, because Dave is the one who came up with the acronym Scientific Computing and Imaging, pronounced SCI. Um, uh, we had this group together, a fairly small group of students, postdocs, myself and Rob, and we decided we were big enough that we should name our group. And so we spent quite a bit of time, weeks of time, going back and forth, coming up with various names of the groups and finding an acronym. And Dave came up with the idea, well, why don't we call ourselves Scientific Computing and Imaging and pronounced SCI? And we all said, yeah, that sounds pretty good. And Dave also created the first SCI logo. If you look at if you go online at the website, there's a link to the history of the Ski Institute, and in there is a photograph, an image of the logo that Dave created of these crossed skis, little mountain in back, and ski. So Dave has been here from the beginning, and is really fundamental to our success, not only just for creating the ski name and logo, but I think he may still hold the record for the most papers published by a graduate student. It's really quite astonishing. He's published way more papers than most assistant professors published when he was a PhD student. He is just amazingly creative and hardworking, and wrote a lot of papers. After he graduated from Ski, Dave started started multiple startup companies. He was the chief technology officer and then later CEO of Numero Biosciences, which developed visualization tools and analysis for biomedical applications. And then Dave was recruited by another Ski alumni, Steve Parker, to join NVIDIA, and that's where Dave has been for the last several years, where he is a senior director of XR and enterprise AI software. So we're very happy to have one of our own Ski alumnus, Dave Weinstein.
All right. It is a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you, Chris and Rob and Ski, for inviting me. It is an honor. So I'm gonna, this is a little bit of a trip down memory lane for me, so indulge me. I'm gonna share with you some of the projects I worked on when I was here at Ski, and some of the projects I've worked on since then, all with kind of an eye towards multidisciplinary, because I think really interesting things happen at the intersection of these different disciplines, especially when it comes to applying it to medical, to life sciences, to human health. So, so I showed up in Utah about 30.5 years ago as a new graduate student, drove out here from Berkeley. And one of the things that the department did after we showed up was the faculty held kind of a meet and greet, and we got to meet a few different research groups and start thinking about what we might want to do as our research as graduate students. And so so I had the opportunity to talk to a few different faculty, and Chris was one of those new faculty members, and he showed me this image on my right, your left, and started describing to me this idea of bioelectric field problems, that there's electricity, coursing through your body. He reminded me about EKGs that we see in, movies, and he was really excited about bioelectricity, but he was even more excited about this idea of scientific computing. And And as he described it to me, scientific computing sits at this intersection between computer science, which I knew something about. I came as a computer science student. Math, that was my other undergraduate degree, so 2 out of 3, great. And science. And I was intrigued by science. I didn't know a ton about science. It was, relatively new for me. But if you could do things like this by putting them all together, I was in. So I met some of the other ski kids who were there at the time. Not everybody was there yet. About half of these people were already there at the time. And everybody was super nice, super welcoming, and a little bit intimidating because they were really smart group of people. And but if they were willing to have me, I was happy to join the group. It wasn't clear what I could contribute yet, but the group needed a name. And I thought, I can do that. So it was, things that you're passionate about, sleepless nights. My sleepless nights were coming up with the name for SCI. Oh, that's me, by the way. And so I did, and I came up with Scientific Computing and Imaging Group. And because of the hard C, we thought it'd be clever to pronounce it SCI. Plus, we were in Utah, but just to kind of emphasize the point, I made the I into a ski, so everyone would kind of get it. And I'm not an artist, obviously, but this logo lived on for a few years until Nathan showed up to do his magic, and we got this logo here. So that was the beginning. And SCI had the incredible good fortune to have Steve Parker as one of those first graduate students. And Chris mentioned that I wrote a number of papers as an undergrad. Steve was unbelievably prolific. Steve built the technical underpinnings that so much of SCI software, of SCI technology was built on for years to come. Countless papers and projects and grants and dissertations, myself included, were built on this foundation that Steve laid out. So truly remarkable. This was Ski Run. So here was one of our early, very famous demos, looking at the forward ECG problem, so dipolar source through a volume conductor, looking at streamlines and isosurfaces. And it was largely based on this that I then took on my research, which was looking at the EEG problem. So same sort of problem, but in the head as a volume conductor. The problem, as I said, was I didn't really know very much about science. And it turns out there was a lot to learn. So I spent years, I still spend years learning about the science, because again, at that intersection, it's great to know math. It's great to know computers and software and algorithms. There has to be a scientific discipline that grabs you, that's something you can apply it to. So as a graduate student, I had to learn about bioelectricity and where it came from, how it worked, EEGs and how that data was processed, visualization, all sorts of new things in order to pursue this problem of the EEG source modeling problem. So over the next 15 or so minutes, as I said, I'm going to walk you through a handful of projects, things that I got a chance to work on while I was at SCI, and then as well as at Numira and now NVIDIA. So as I mentioned, my main project here as a graduate student was working on what's called the inverse EEG problem. And the idea sounds pretty simple. You take scalp electrodes, you put them on the outside of your head, and you want to solve what's called an inverse problem, where you can map those electrical recordings back into the head through the skin and the skull and the CSF back onto the cortical surface to see what the activation is looking like on the brain surface for mapping of the brain, as well as sometimes looking for sources in the case of epileptic seizures, looking for very strong pronounced sources. So fairly simple to describe. There's an elevator pitch for it. It turns out it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do because you have to build finite element meshes. You have to sort of understand the intricacies of what makes those meshes work and what makes them not work. You have to discretize the physics to apply it, run it on really big computers at the time, which had today we wouldn't think much of their processing power, but it was a lot at the time, and ultimately solve this inverse problem. And so I had the good fortune again of working with many very smart colleagues, grad students, faculty, and built, I'll show a video here. So this was one of the videos that I showed in my dissertation, sort of towards the end there. So we can move a dipolar source around within this volume conductor head model. Head model was somewhat complicated. We're looking at the discretization there. And then based on those readings, we're going to try to solve for where was that source within the model, right? So it's sort of a hide and seek problem. So we placed a source, and now through a simplex search algorithm, we're going to try to optimize the circles. The spheres are showing us what the current source potentials would be if that was the source. And through this simulated annealing simplex search approach, we found it. So, so putting together all of these pieces required, understanding of computational methods, algorithms, working across these large-scale computers, understanding enough neuroscience to be able to speak to a neuroscience community. It was at that intersectionality that I did this work. Another really fun project that I worked on with Gordon Kindleman, was looking at diffusion tensor imaging. So what I should have mentioned on that previous slide is one of the things that makes solving this problem hard is that different materials in your body, in my case, in this problem in your head, conduct electricity anisotropically. So it doesn't, your skull doesn't conduct electricity as well this way as it does this way. White matter within your brain is anisotropic. Electric signals travel along it, not across it. And visualizing and understanding those structures, again, gives us a deeper understanding of neuroscience. But the Viz community had a really interesting role to play, taking those volumes of data and helping people understand them. So this was some really fun work that we did with visualizing diffusion tensor data. Another really fun project, this one was also with Gordon, but also with a bunch of other people. So a postdoc, Charles Keller from Mario Capecchi's lab, was working with all of these knockout mouse models. Knockout mouse, to remind you, is sort of an animal model of human disease, which you can then, the pharmaceutical companies and others then use to test out new molecules to see if we can treat it. So this work was just looking at this particular mouse here. And the interesting thing about this project was it was looking at the vasculature of this mouse, and the mouse was alive. So the mouse was immobilized, put in a contrast chamber. Sorry for the jumpiness of the video. And then we're able to visualize both the vasculature and the skeletal structures. And this was challenging at the time. And the reason that it was challenging was that the usual one-dimensional transfer functions wouldn't work. You ended up with images like you're seeing on the left, where all the bones either turned pink or we lost all the vasculature. And Gordon had this great idea of looking at multi-dimensional transfer functions, which you're seeing on the top right there, as a way to tease apart the different materials within the mouse. All right. So those were some of the early projects at SCI. Then, as Chris mentioned, I left the nest and went and launched a couple of startup companies, one after the other. The first one was Visual Influence, which then got acquired and turned into Numira. And these were some of the projects that we worked on in Visual Influence. In the interest of time, I won't go through all of these, but again, intersectionality kind of remains the theme here. Looking at bottom right, these are breast MRI data specifically looking at tumors and being able to quantify tumor volume. Bottom left, we're looking at emissions from a smokestack. This was work with Ross and Carey, trying to quantify the amount of particulate that a particular smokestack was putting out by looking at, opacity. And so working on these problems was, again, really fun, challenging. The one that kept coming back over and over again was the one at the top left, looking at these mouse models. I mentioned Charles Keller earlier. Transition. Okay, so Charles, one of the ideas that he had was we could take these mice, again, animal models of human disease, and if we sacrificed the mice instead of keep them alive through the imaging chamber, we could do imaging studies of them to look at progression of disease. So what he wanted to look at was things like cartilage or things like atherosclerotic plaques. And not all of these things show up very well under CT because mostly bone shows up. And so he came up with some ideas for how to stain these models, some chemistry involved there, so that we could then see these soft tissue structures. And so we ended up doing a lot of studies where we would literally have animals sent to us, sacrificed animals sent to us. We would image them at very, very high resolution, down to 3 or even 1.5 micron resolution. And then using tools like SCI30, which I was still using at our company, we were able to quantify all sorts of different metrics to help the pharmaceutical companies understand if their molecule was working and how well it was working. And this next slide has a great image from a study we did with Amgen. So this is one of those atherosclerosis projects. We're looking at plaques within the aortic arch of these mice. And when you would play this as a video, there would be a cutting plane that would sweep through the aortic arch. You would see it cross-planar down there on the bottom right. And so you could visualize, you could see what our algorithm had labeled as plaque and not as plaque. And then we had a bunch of metrics sort of showing what percent occlusion. And then based on this data, Amgen would adjust their molecule or choose to move forward with one molecule versus another one. So really cool projects to work on. Got to work with a bunch of smart people and understand, the things that were driving them so that we could help. All right, and that takes us to NVIDIA. So, so as Chris mentioned, Steve was at NVIDIA, and I was just wrapping up my last startup company. And Steve invited me to come join him at NVIDIA. And I said, no. I said, I don't really want to go work for a big company. It's not really, I've never done it before. It doesn't really seem like something I'd like. And he said, well, come talk to some people, and if it works out, maybe you can kind of run a little startup inside of NVIDIA. I said, okay, well, that sounds okay. What would I be doing? What would I be working on? And he said, virtual reality. And I said, yeah, I don't think so. I tried virtual reality a few years ago, and it had potential, but it was horrible. And I don't do great with motion sickness. He said, well, come try the new tech and let's see how it works out. And the rest is a little bit of history. So so I went to NVIDIA and I run a group that looks at enterprise use of AR and VR. And the reason, again, that this was interesting to me is I got to go into the spaces like media and entertainment, where they wanted to use virtual reality for something called virtual production, where they use these very large LED walls essentially as a backdrop to create the background for scenes in movies. Medical was an early adopter of virtual reality and augmented reality. And then there were a bunch of design spaces where people were designing cars or buildings or other expensive things. And if you could immerse them inside of their data, it just made a world of difference. People could make better decisions. It's really hard when you're designing a building to know what it's going to feel like in a room with 20-foot ceilings versus 25-foot ceilings. And looking at a rendering on a screen doesn't really get you there. But you put on a headset and you walk around in the building, and you have a really good sense of what it feels like. So, so VR took off in sort of fits and starts. But again, it was at that intersection, playing with all of these different applications that really made it fun. This video doesn't have sound, so I think I should just be able to play this. This is showing off, perfect. I apologize for the jerkiness. I'm not sure why it's going so slowly, except that it's trying to do it over Teams. So this is a company called Proprio that uses AR and VR for spine surgery. Turns out that when they're inserting screws into a patient's spine, it's really difficult to know exactly what angle to go in order to leave the spine with exactly the right sort of arc that you want to it. But using VR with feedback tools, sort of showing you exactly what angle to go in, they have incredible rates of success. So just, you know, an example of something that science, medicine has been doing forever, and VR comes along and is just the perfect tool to help take these surgeons and make them much, much more accurate and efficient. And, you know, Proprio is an amazing company. They're not unique. There's lots of companies in the medical space that very quickly saw the potential of VR, jumped in. Everything from physical therapy, you know, using VR and AR to make physical therapy more interesting, more targeted, through, as we just showed, surgery, but also surgical training, using it for mental health. The list of applications of immersion, VR and AR for medicine just sort of goes on and on. And of course, with the new Apple Vision Pro headset, there's this renewed interest, and you know, Apple seeded them to a bunch of doctors who are now doing surgeries with them and publishing their results. And it really is just a very exciting space to be working in. The other thing, as has been mentioned, the other thing that's been going on is AI sort of came back and turned out to be an extremely valuable tool in the medical space. Okay, so I'm going to try and play a video here. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so what do we think I need to do? Turn on my volume? Try playing it. Okay, so I'm muted on here, so I don't think it'll go through, but we'll see.
So that's the microphone that's muted. Maybe.
Nope.
Maybe try the unmute.
Okay.
Helping our loved ones recover safely in the hospital. And at home, I mentioned to the doctor that I am allergic to penicillin. Is it still okay to take the medication?
Definitely. These antibiotics don't contain penicillin, so it's perfectly safe for you to take them.
I am delivering new insights into treating disease. Enabling better diagnoses faster.
I'm going to kill the audio. There's decent subtitles on here. Okay, I'm going to mute myself. All right, I'm going to let the video play though, because this is a video that I will point you at on my next slide. But the point of this video, this was presented by Kimberly Clark, who's our VP for Healthcare at NVIDIA. She presented at our GTC conference last month, basically just showing all of the ways that that researchers are now using AI across the life sciences translational everything. And, there's wonderful dramatic music and a voice track behind it. You can just imagine. But again, I'll sort of send you to it and you can watch it on your own time. But, everything from genomics on up. And it's true. I mean, AI has enormous potential. It's hard to come up with a scientific discipline, a scientific undertaking where AI isn't already starting to have some impact. And, this kind of feels like, yes, Pat is right. AI has been around for a while, but this kind of feels like early days for, the potential of AI. All right, so I'm going to jump to the next slide, maybe. All right. So yeah, as I said, NVIDIA has this GPU technology conference, GTC, every year, and a bunch of people come and present. Kimberly Clark, she's third one over there. But if you just go to the NVIDIA website, you can watch a bunch of videos on demand. And there was a huge track of presentation sessions related to healthcare, life sciences, all leveraging AI. So I would encourage you to watch Kimberly's talk. There were a bunch of other great talks there. Yeah, so anybody can register for free and go watch those. So tying this back to XR for a second, there's a really amazing thing that happens when you take a VR headset or an AR tablet and you take a discipline, a scientific discipline, like how do I place the screw in this patient's back, but then you also apply AI to assist in driving those algorithms. And so these are just, some recent web pages and press announcements from some of our partners, Medical Holodeck, this AI XR lab. Really, my point is many groups have jumped on this and incredible results are coming out of this. And so, for me, there's an interesting parallel where, what Chris described to me when I very first showed up here in Utah, and he was so excited about bioelectric field problems, this intersection, I see something very similar happening today at kind of this intersection of AI, immersion, and applying it across a huge space of medical applications. All right, so this is my last slide. Again, I wanted to thank Chris and Rob for starting all of this. It was an amazing home for me for 15 years, for so many of my fellow students for a long time. So many great friends and colleagues came out of the SCI Institute, and yeah, it was a great time, and thank you for having me back.
Questions for Dave?
Katie, are you asking a question? I thought Katie had a question for me. I was like, uh-oh.
I knew nothing. So I remember, Dave, when you were considering your future career, and you told me once that, as a computer scientist, I felt like I always had to release a product. That was what, sort of came in with, applied into that as I thought, I'd be treated as a biomedical person, didn't have that inclination. And I always thought you could have been a great academic.
Thanks, Rob.
And you've obviously done very well in your own direction. I'm assuming you've been very happy with that choice. But looking back now, what were the factors? What are the factors that the younger group, the grad students that are around now, should be considering when they're at that fork? Where should you go with this career?
Yeah.
Big company, small company, you've done it all. Stay in that. What are the big factors?
Such a good question. I mean, I'm going to give a wishy-washy answer, but there's kind of a reason for it. Part of what I really enjoyed about doing small startup companies was hiring teams, bringing people together, and teaching. right? And teaching the new kids how to, the processes and what all this meant and how to use the tools. And I think that if you enjoy that, if you enjoy kind of the collaborative mentoring, you can find opportunities to do it almost anywhere you go. You just have to pick the right place, right? So what I like about NVIDIA is it's very collaborative. And for better or for worse, they have sucked a lot of the talent. We started seeing this, 15 years ago. A lot of the talent that was in universities kind of got brought into companies. And so, we have research teams that are working on hard and interesting problems. At the end of the day, we don't publish as much. We typically, at NVIDIA, we don't have to apply for grants, but there's still that spirit of collaboration and mentoring and getting to work on really fun, interesting projects, which was really what I wanted to do. And so, how do I translate that into advice for young students? I think my point is, if what you really enjoy doing is working in groups or mentoring or even just getting up at a whiteboard and explaining things to people, absolutely, academia is a great place to do that, but there are also other places where you can go to do that.
The same notion that Will was just describing of that sparks coming together, collaborative group.
Yep. Yeah. It's really fun to be part of those.
So happy you found it.
Thanks, Rob. Any other questions?
We got one more.
Yeah. So, how do you see moral and ethical obligations that might come in medical imaging or doctors that actually can be involved in the new trials?
Yeah, I mean, I think your question is about kind of the ethics side of AI, if I'm guessing, because that seems to be everyone's question. The ethics side of AI is thorny and messy, and we're all familiar with the crux of it. But just to restate it, as we started to see self-driving cars, and an early self-driving car hit a pedestrian and killed someone, the question was, oh my God, do we put on the brakes? Do we literally stop having self-driving cars? And it turns out that self-driving cars are safer when you kind of compare them mile per mile and how many accidents are there. But as a society, it's a really hard problem. Like, if you run into me, I know to blame you, and we kind of know how to work through that. And we haven't really figured out what to do when computers do the wrong thing. And AI, I think, just sort of exacerbates that. It's even harder to pin down, why it did what it did and who's actually, liable or legally responsible. And so I don't think we have answers for that yet. It's going to show up everywhere that we do AI. So, this will be an ongoing conversation. At some point, it will become more normalized. But I do think it's important to keep our eye on the big picture, which is it will be the case that AI-assisted doctors or just AIs make wrong medical recommendations and that patients die because of it. But I think the question that we have to ask is, what is, it's not like doctors are infallible, right? And if the AIs are actually outperforming the doctors as a whole, we have to be willing to accept that as a benefit, I think.
Questions? Great talk. Going back to your grad student project, I only had like glimpses of stuff that you've done back when I was a student. It makes me actually wonder, have you ever wanted to pick that back up and look at brain-computer interfaces, elements like that, for a goal, I guess, a little bit more business development related?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things that I love about being at NVIDIA now is being on the other side of the table, because I spent a lot of years on the side of the table where we were a small company going to big companies, begging them to talk to us, much less use our solutions. So it's really great to have a team that works with me who goes out and works with small startups, works with, you know, individual scientists who want to use our technology, and we get to help them. And it's, I think, a lot more fun being on my side of the table. Maybe I'm just older and more tired at this point. But I still get to work with those companies, right? And especially now in the VR space, even in the AI space, everybody is, you know, building different sensors, trying to figure out, you know, and it does make me laugh when I see these articles about, oh my God, they can read my brain waves now from, you know, this one point right here and know what but it's pretty cool to see some of the early results of that work. And it is nice to kind of know how it works and what its limitations are. And, you know, the credit for all of that goes to Rob and Chris and Ski and teaching me all that stuff. So yeah,